You know, one of my favorite things in life is owning little tiny pieces of plastic and fabric of various marketable brands in my household. All the different products, the various types of styles, it's all rather charming. I look at this Kool-Aid SpongeBob plush for example, and can't help but smile knowing this little guy is my very own. You know what else I like? That series of games where an animatronic bear has to go save his son from one of Scott Cawthon's many alternative accounts. So today we're going to take a look at some of the major companies behind a lot of the merch we've gotten over the years. Not all of them, however, or we'd be here all day. There's only so much I can talk about regarding horrendous stickers featuring Mega Man-styled Springtrap. In early 2015, we received some of the very first Five Nights at Freddy's merchandise to date. These would be done by the company Sanchi, who have worked with other IPs in the past such as Persona and Bioshock. Sanchi is probably the company that has captured the feel of owning something from in-universe the best, be it recreations of the in-game plushies, security badges, or a recreation of the Celebrate poster from the first game. It really feels like you're owning a piece of the actual series when holding one of these. I personally own some of the plushies. They use soft material and high-quality fabric, are stitched pretty well, and are quite accurate to the plush designs from the original mobile port for FNaF 1. The scale of the plush is also pretty good for the price you're paying for. And they even come with little tags giving off descriptions of each of the characters. I also really dig some of their other products. I've always loved this shirt based off the Save Them minigame, and having it styled after Atari 26 era box art, it's a really charming concept and pulls it off very effectively. Same with the arcade token set. It's a creative concept that fits well with the whole theme of the series. However, that's not to say they're perfect. I actually feel they're a tad overrated in regards to how the community treats them. One of the issues Sanchi and many other companies face was always the variety and the representation of the games they chose. Most companies involved with the brand tend to choose FNaF 1 as their prime focus and one other game. If we're lucky, occasionally they'll also throw in a tiny thing for fans of the other games. This has happened with so many companies that have gotten the rights for the series, and has genuinely gotten really tiring. Don't get me wrong, FNaF 1 is one of my favorites, and I think the classics are probably one of the best animatronic groups. But after 8 years, they should not be the only ones actually being represented. With Sanchi, back then they chose FNaF 1 and 2 as their prime focus. FNaF 3 never got anything, while FNaF 4 and SL got 2 items each. Unfortunately, the issue was made worse when they got the license back. They've been content with only re-releasing the original FNaF 1 plushies and badge, leaving it at that. None of the shirts, none of the stickers, not even Fredbear Plush is in stock anymore, so now it is strictly FNaF 1. Despite that, not even the Celebrate poster is in stock. I can appreciate the fact that they focused on the actual quality of said product, which will rightfully be their legacy in the long run, but it makes it harder to recommend them as time goes on, and the franchise continues to expand beyond just that original first entry. When it comes to their FNaF products, Mcfarlane is most known for their buildable sets. First releasing in 2016, with the most recent sets releasing in 2020, these sets would come with figures of the various animatronics and allow you to put together one of the different areas and locations from each game, being one of the only lines of merch to do something like that. From the office of Fazbear's Fright, to the FNaF 4 bedroom, to even Corn Maze from Curse of Dreadbear, they offered a lot of variety in the various locations they covered. As for the sets themselves, they're the equivalent of a Lego set. You open them up, get the bricks out, and build them piece by piece till you have your completed set. The level of detail packed into them is well appreciated and occasionally has nods to other games. The classic show stage set has an arcade machine with BB's Air Adventure on it, and the toy stage set has a little sticker of Rainbow from FNaF World. A lot of the figures have really good molds that perfectly capture the look and feel of said character, though occasionally the paint job will be a bit lackluster, and the proportions could use some work. Unfortunately, a lot of the sets weren't re-released often, so... I can never open this in my entire life. Then there's the 8-bit series. These were 2 lines of figures based on Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 3, and 4, where you could build the various character sprites from the minigames. I have never been a fan of this series. I absolutely love the concept and think it has plenty of potential. However, the execution leaves a lot to be desired. Series 1 has the issue of having inconsistent black borders around certain pieces. Series 2 meanwhile doesn't make various pieces long enough, so the proportions just end up looking off. These are cases where they would have benefited greatly from utilizing transparent pieces. I own the purple guy figure, and he suffers from several issues. He's very fragile, He has a poor paint job with noticeable white dots everywhere. In his head ain't even a square. They messed up the most consistent and recognizable part of his minigame design. There were some decent ones, such as a plush Bonnie figure from the FNaF 4 line. However, those were few and far between, while the grand majority are comparable to the quality of Rectangle BV. While I've been pretty critical with 8-bit series, I really did enjoy their normal sets, and it's a shame that Mcfarlane doesn't seem to have the license anymore, judging by the fact they haven't released anything since 2020. Then we have the most infamous of the bunch, Funko. If you've gone to any local GameStop, you've likely seen a wall covered in Funko Pops. They understandably aren't exactly looked upon fondly by most, be it because of the mountain of recolors they release, the whole security breach controversy, which is a discussion in itself, the FNaF NFT controversy, which they were also involved with, or their history of stealing fan designs. Funko does not have the best reputation. Starting off, we have the plushies, arguably the most inconsistent in quality of the bunch. Series 1 started things off pretty strong. Going off of their designs, it was pretty clear the plushies at the time were meant as cheaper, smaller, and commercially available alternatives to Sanchi's offerings, and I feel that worked out really well for them. They had nice material, good variety covering characters from the first 2 entries, and a decent price tag. However, things started to go downhill as time went on, as Funko would really start to grow a fondness for cheaper and printed on material, and would try to make their own original designs, which would lead to mixed success. Some of these would actually work out quite well. The toy Chica plush, for example, is quite adorable and a nice improvement over the original Chica plush, while the Ennard plush just feels incomplete and looks like a bee stung him. They would later make a brief comeback. The Pizzeria Simulator wave is widely seen by the community as a pretty good wave, even if it had some questionable choices. These plushies would return to their roots and stick to a more consistent template, which I feel benefited them. My only nitpick is moving forward, they changed how they approached the eyes, and it never really looked right to me. Some plushies like Frostbear and Dreadbear pull it off pretty well. Meanwhile, others like Spring Bonnie tend to look a tad depressed. Guess he saw what became of his future. Unfortunately, however, the recent FNaF AR wave is the prime example where the plushies struggle. The material is very cheap and looks very rough. The bow ties are printed on, the ears look very flimsy, they're missing obvious details, and of course it has its own line of recolors with very unappealing palettes. In the future, I feel Funko should focus more on the pure quality, focus on the softer material and the finer details of the plush. I feel more people would appreciate a wave that consists of 2 or 3 thought out plushies over a set that consists of 12 plushies that feel more comparable to the ones you'd find in a prize machine. Next on the list, we have the various lines of figures they've released, and for cheap affordable figures, they're actually pretty solid. Unlike most of Funko's other merch, which usually goes for stylized designs, the figures actually aim to stay faithful to the designs you would see in the actual games themselves, and for the most part they do a pretty impressive job at it. A lot of the smaller details are here, such as Springtrap's missing finger, and Frostbear's icicle being an accessory. They captured most of Scrap Baby's withering pretty well. The amount of detail on Ennard is insane, and Dreadbear straight up feels like a smaller scale version of his in-game model. Even the recent glow-in-the-dark AR wave, which I was originally cautious about when information about them first leaked, managed to impress me. The molds are very accurate and full of detail. They're a lot less fragile than earlier waves, and per usual, the box art for each wave is just really lovely. However, the figures are not perfect. For the longest time up until the Curse of Dreadbear wave, Funko would advertise a special aspect of each wave known as the Build-A-Figure. Each figure would come with a part of another character, and once you had all the characters, you could build that character. It's a pretty cool concept on paper, but falls apart in execution. If the figure manages to break, it's a lot harder to replace it since you now have to worry about several figures going out of stock. Not to mention, it just isn't convenient for the customer. Say someone is just a fan of Nightmarion. It's annoying to have to buy an entire series of figures in order to get the one character they actually like, so I'm glad this was forgotten in later waves. The next one is more so a general Funko complaint, but feels appropriate to mention here. While Funko is objectively the best company when it comes to character and game variety, being one of the very few to make merch of the novel characters, as well as many fan favorite characters such as the Mediocres, and I feel that's an aspect of them that goes underappreciated, they're not perfect. Yes, we Springtrap fans would be in a much darker place without them, but they still make questionable choices when it comes to character selection, and it's no more apparent than if you look at FNaF 1 and FFPS. Funko has an obsession with the classics. I think this is pretty clear. They're constantly making products of them in recolors such as the blacklight, glow-in-the-dark, and tie-dye waves, as a means of re-releasing them. However, despite making recolors, they refrain from doing popular characters from the series who could reuse pre-existing molds, such as Fredbear and JJ. The same stuff mentioned before also applies to FFPS, as Funko frequently does the same with a random selection of the Tycoon animatronics, such as giving them glow-in-the-dark merch. Instead of focusing on the main 3 animatronics of said game, they were pushed to the sideline in favor of frequently making new products of Rockstar Freddy instead. The only reason we likely got Lefty was because he's a recolor of him. Even to this day, 5 years after FFPS's release, they will still go back to make more merch of the game, but only to make jumbo and tie-dye versions of Rockstar Freddy. Funko is allergic to the mere concept of acknowledging Springtrap. This same thing can be seen with earlier waves. Where was Nightmare Fredbear, and why did we get Funtime Foxy in the FNaF 4 wave? Or why did we not get Bidybab in the plush line when we got Exotic Butters of all things? However, they have started to get a bit better with character variety. The FNaF AR wave finally gave us new merch of counterparts of the Toys, Springtrap, Baby, and Ballora after several years of nothing. While the tie-dye merch is using the classics for the core lineup, it's also using Springtrap and Funtime Foxy. So perhaps this is a sign things will get better, and we'll finally see more characters getting acknowledgement. Then we have probably the most well-known of the bunch, the Funko Pops. I will admit, I've never really been much of a Pops fanatic. I get the appeal, the really cheap and affordable detailed figures that you can find in most stores, that have figures for practically every single brand known to man. I think what always turned me off was the blank lifeless eyes and lack of mouths for most characters. When it comes to FNaF, I think the lifeless eyes actually kind of work in its favor, given the animatronic's uncanny nature. Some of the FNaF Pops genuinely feel like cheapified versions of the original characters. This is most apparent with Toy Freddy. As for the variants, flocked Pops are soft and fuzzy, while the glow-in-the-dark Pops are self-explainable. Not too huge on them being colored entirely bright green, however. Now we move on to the last major Funko line and my personal favorite, the Mystery Minis. Like with Funko Pops, Mystery Minis usually follow a consistent base that's modified to match the design of the character it's based on. However, I feel they're stylized a lot better, and are oftentimes very cute and adorable. Despite their size, Mystery Minis tend to be some of the most detailed and polished pieces of FNaF merch. The paint jobs usually tend to be pretty solid. The molds themselves are very accurate and manage to squeeze in a lot of the smaller details. And they can normally take a character I don't care for and make them look very sick. They also have the absolute best character variety of any Funko merch line. Yes, there are still some omissions, such as Wizard Freddy and my dear beloved Springtrap, but we still get plenty of obscure characters who rarely see the light of day in merch, such as Lil Joe, the Paper Pals, Fruit Punch Clown, and even major characters like Molten Freddy and Dave Miller only got love in this wave. Mystery Minis also haven't really had any major low points. Yes, there has been a peak. Twisted Ones plus Sister Location wave was perfection, as it was pure high quality and full of character and game variety. The recent AR wave updated some of the older character molds and improved upon them. The weakest wave would probably be the Security Breach one. However, the Core 5 minis were still well made. It was just a lackluster lineup as it was mostly padded out with recolors. Goatee is still pretty cool though. My only problem with Mystery Minis is more of a personal thing. I've never been good at blind bags and have terrible luck, so I tend to end up with plenty of doubles. Dear God, please help me. Though the rates did get worse over time, starting out with mostly 1 in 12s and a few 1 in 36. Nowadays, however, they mostly consist of a few 1 in 6, a 1 in 12, a 1 in 24, and 2 1 in 72 to collect in each series of Mystery Minis, which can make the odds of getting your favorite character even worse than before. I still remember the screams I heard at the sight of Arctic Ballora being a 1 in 72. Dark times. There's still plenty more Funko merch to look at, such as the so-called pint-sized heroes. What is your definition, man? And squish the hell out of Springtrap. But I feel this is a good stopping point for now. Funko is far from a perfect company, and has a lot to learn from and improve upon. However, they're also one I feel is underappreciated in the greater community. People always suggest the idea that Funko needs to be replaced by Sanchi. However, I feel all things considered we'd be in a far worse place without them. There is one last company I'd like to tackle. Hex is a company that was formed by famous FNaF YouTuber Dako and artist Hero Shark. They're one of the most recent companies to get the license, with their first wave of products having been released early on in February of this year. Currently, they have released 6 plushies, consisting of the original 4 animatronics in the Fredbear's family diner duo. However, artwork for the core toys and Mangle have been shown off on various occasions. That gives me hope we'll eventually see plushies for characters such as Springtrap. As of now, I own Bonnie and Spring Bonnie. Unlike Funko and Sanchi, which are based on the plush designs from the games, Hex went for its own style, and I feel it stands out far more as a result. From the button eyes to the more animalistic features, these are one of a kind. Compared to Sanchi, not only are they larger, but they also have the same amount of quality when it comes to the fabric and material. Each plush comes with their own accessories such as the cupcake or the remote from SL. The main selling point is most certainly the magnets. They are quite strong, and if you have the others, you can mix and match them. They also come with little cards for each character, with great artwork of them. Some of them even reference the other games, such as the purple guy for FNAF 2 appearing on Spring Bonnie's card. The only aspect that will turn people off is the price. They are quite expensive. Understandably though, given the material and type of magnets used. But I totally understand if someone felt they weren't worth the asking price. Perhaps in the future, they could consider doing magnetless variants to reduce the cost for those who don't really care for the series gimmick. Overall, there is a lot to praise and criticize regarding the merchandise from this franchise. However, I only criticize because I know they can do better, and I've seen each of these companies release great products that I'd love to see more of. Through their ups and downs, I look forward to seeing whatever comes next for this series. But seriously, can Scraptrap have more than just a single coloring book page? Huh?
Actually, you forgot the Fazbear Boom Rise of Lyric line of figures, and yet you call yourself a real fan?
Get out of my house!